Northbridge Castle awakens beneath the damp mist of an English spring morning. Stone walls, centuries old, hold within them the weight of tradition and unspoken secrets. In the heart of this aristocratic household, young Clara moves silently through corridors adorned with tapestries depicting battles long forgotten. Her duties are carried out with precision, each movement deliberate and careful. She has not spoken a word since the accident that marked her childhood, a trauma that silenced her voice but sharpened her ability to observe. The household staff know Clara as the quiet maid, the one who listens but never speaks. Among the rigid hierarchy of service, she occupies a peculiar position, neither pitied nor dismissed, simply accepted. The Duchess Elizabeth stands apart from others in the household. Where the Duke Edward maintains cold formality, Elizabeth offers genuine warmth. During afternoon tea service, their eyes meet briefly, and in that moment, a silent understanding passes between them. The Duke commands respect through authority rather than affection. His posture remains rigid during meals, his eyes scrutinizing every detail of the household's operation. Any imperfection in service receives immediate correction. Clara has learned to anticipate his expectations, moving through her tasks like a ghost, present yet unnoticed. But on this particular morning, something changes. While tidying the private chambers, Clara discovers fragments of a torn letter scattered near the fireplace. The words she pieces together send ice through her veins, veiled threats directed at the Duchess. Her hands tremble as she collects each piece, hiding them carefully in her apron pocket. The discovery weighs heavily on her mind throughout the day. Someone within these walls wishes harm upon the one person who has shown her kindness. Clara knows she must act, but without a voice. Her options remain limited. The shadows in Northbridge Castle suddenly feel far more menacing than the mere absence of light. Clara spends the following days piecing together the puzzle before her. She observes conversations between long-serving staff members, noting suspicious glances and hushed tones that cease abruptly when others approach. The rigid social structure of the household makes investigation challenging. A maid questioning her superiors would face immediate dismissal. Yet Clara possesses an advantage. People speak freely around those they believe cannot repeat their words. She develops alternative methods of communication, small written notes left in strategic locations, meaningful glances during service, subtle gestures that convey warning without drawing attention. The Duchess begins to notice Clara's unusual behavior, the urgency in her movements, but the nature of the threat remains unclear. Then circumstances take a darker turn. Elizabeth falls suddenly ill during a dinner party, her complexion turning pale, hands trembling as she excuses herself from the table. The household physician is summoned immediately. He prescribes rest and continued medication, but Clara's suspicions deepen. She remembers the torn letter, the whispered conversations, the pattern of behavior that preceded this moment. The Duke's concern appears genuine, yet his response feels inadequate, too quick to accept the physician's diagnosis, too reluctant to investigate further. Clara realizes she must take greater risks to protect Elizabeth. Late one evening, she ventures into areas forbidden to ordinary staff, the study where household accounts are kept, the medicine cabinet where treatments are stored. Her heart pounds with each step, knowing discovery would mean immediate termination, but loyalty to the Duchess outweighs fear of consequences. What she discovers in those forbidden spaces confirms her worst suspicions. Someone has been systematically working to harm Elizabeth, and time is running short to prevent further damage. The grandfather clock in the main hall chimes midnight as Clara navigates the shadowed corridors of Northbridge Castle's private wing. Her heart pounds against her ribs, each beat echoing the transgression she commits by being in this forbidden space. The oil lamp she carries casts dancing shadows across portraits of long-deceased dukes and duchesses, their painted eyes seeming to judge her intrusion. She has spent weeks gathering fragments of evidence, torn letters, suspicious medication bottles, overheard conversations, but tonight she seeks the final piece that will make her case undeniable. The study door creaks as she pushes it open, the sound abnormally loud in the stillness of night. Moonlight streams through tall windows, illuminating mahogany furniture and leather-bound ledgers. Clara moves quickly to the desk, where household accounts are kept, her fingers trembling as she searches through drawers. She finds what she seeks in the third drawer down. Correspondence between Mr. Thornton and an apothecary in London, discussing modifications to the Duchess's prescribed medications. The dates align perfectly with Elizabeth's decline in health. A floorboard groans behind her. Clara spins round to find Duke Edward standing in the doorway, his face a mask of controlled fury. He wears a burgundy dressing gown over his nightclothes, his grey hair dishevelled from sleep. For a moment, neither moves. The air between them crackles with tension, servant and master, silence and authority, desperation and power. "What?" the Duke says slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. "Do you think you are doing in my private study at this ungodly hour?" Clara cannot answer with words, but she refuses to cower. She straightens her spine, meeting his gaze directly, an act of defiance that would normally result in immediate dismissal. In her hands, she holds the incriminating letters, the evidence she has risked everything to obtain. She extends them toward him, her gesture firm, despite the fear coursing through her veins. Edward's eyes narrow. "You dare enter my private chambers, rifle through my personal correspondence, and now expect me to—" He stops mid-sentence as his gaze falls upon the letters in her hands. Recognition flickers across his features. He snatches the papers from her, his movements sharp with anger. But as he begins to read, his expression shifts from fury to confusion, then to dawning horror. The silence stretches between them as he reads page after page. Clara watches his face carefully, observing the precise moment when comprehension strikes. His hands begin to tremble slightly, the papers rustling in his grip. When he finally looks up at her, the anger has drained from his features, replaced by something far more complex. Shock, disbelief, and the terrible realization that someone within his own household has betrayed him in the most profound way possible. "Where did you find these?" he demands, then immediately catches himself, remembering that she cannot answer verbally. His frustration manifests in the tightening of his jaw, the way his fingers clench around the letters. "Show me." Clara leads him through the castle, pointing out locations where she discovered various pieces of evidence. The medicine cabinet where bottles were substituted, the servants' quarters where suspicious meetings occurred, the rubbish heap behind the kitchen where torn correspondence had been discarded. With each revelation, the Duke's composure fractures further. This man who prides himself on maintaining absolute control over his household must confront the reality that conspiracy has flourished beneath his very nose. In the days that follow, the atmosphere at Northbridge Castle transforms dramatically. Word spreads among the staff that Clara, the silent maid, has somehow confronted the Duke himself and survived the encounter. More than survived, she has apparently presented evidence serious enough to shake the very foundations of household trust. The servants divide into factions, their loyalties tested by circumstances no one fully understands yet. Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper who has served the family for 30 years, regards Clara with newfound wariness during morning roll call. "You've overstepped badly. Girl," she hisses when they pass in the corridor. "No good comes from servants forgetting their place. Mark my words, this will end poorly for you." But others see Clara's actions differently. Young Thomas, the footman who has always been kind to her, offers a subtle nod of respect when their paths cross. "Whatever you've done," he murmurs quietly, ensuring no one else hears, "it took courage." We all know the Duchess has been poorly, and if you've helped her somehow, well, not all of us are blind to what goes on in this house. The Duchess herself remains sequestered in her chambers, but Clara notices that Elizabeth has stopped taking the medications that were making her ill. Instead, a new physician from London has been summoned, one with no prior connection to the household. This doctor brings fresh treatments, and almost immediately, colour begins returning to the Duchess's cheeks. She starts taking short walks in the garden, leaning on her lady's maid for support, but growing stronger each day. The Duke's behaviour changes most dramatically. Where he once moved through the castle with rigid certainty, Edward now appears burdened by doubt. He questions long-standing household arrangements. He reviews accounts personally rather than delegating to his steward. He watches the staff with new scrutiny, as if seeing them truly for the first time. And when his eyes fall upon Clara during her duties, there is no longer dismissal in his gaze, but rather a complex mixture of emotions she cannot quite decipher. Respect, perhaps, or grudging acknowledgement, or simply the discomfort of a man whose worldview has been fundamentally challenged by someone he had considered beneath his notice. One evening, as Clara is turning down the lamps in the main hall, the Duke approaches her alone. They stand in the dying light of day, shadows lengthening across the stone floor. He struggles visibly with what he wants to say, a man unaccustomed to explaining himself to servants. "I owe you," he begins, then stops, choosing his words carefully. "What you have done, the evidence you have brought to my attention, it required considerable courage and insight. I misjudged you. I misjudged the situation in my own household, that is—" He pauses, clearly finding the admission difficult. "That is to my shame." Clara merely nods, accepting his words without triumph or resentment. She has never sought recognition or reward, only the safety of the woman who showed her kindness in a household otherwise indifferent to her existence. The Duke studies her face for a long moment, perhaps searching for some sign of the thoughts she cannot voice, then nods curtly and walks away, leaving Clara alone with the lamplight and the weight of everything that has changed. The investigation that follows Clara's revelations unfolds with the methodical precision of a legal proceeding. Duke Edward, shaken by the evidence of conspiracy within his own walls, refuses to handle the matter internally as might have been customary in earlier generations. Instead, he summons authorities from London, a detective inspector from Scotland Yard, and a magistrate known for his impartiality in cases involving the aristocracy. They arrive on a grey morning, their motorcar crunching up the gravel drive of Northbridge Castle. Inspector Ashford is a compact man in his 50s, with sharp eyes that miss nothing and a methodical approach to questioning that quickly unsettles those with something to hide. The magistrate, Lord Pemberton, serves primarily as witness to ensure proper procedures are followed, his presence lending official weight to the proceedings. The servants are questioned one by one in the library, a room chosen for its formality and the implicit message that this is no casual inquiry. Clara watches from the corridors as each staff member emerges from their interview, some relieved, others visibly shaken, a few defiant. When her own turn comes, Inspector Ashford regards her with curiosity tempered by professionalism. "Miss Clara," he begins, then pauses, having been briefed about her inability to speak. "I understand you cannot answer verbally, but I'm told you can write. Will you consent to writing out your testimony?" He slides paper and pen across the desk toward her. "For the next 3 hours," Clara writes. Her hand cramps from the effort of transcribing everything she has observed over the past months, the suspicious conversations, the patterns of behavior, the locations where she found evidence, the timeline of the Duchess's illness coinciding with specific events. Inspector Ashford reads each page as she completes it, occasionally asking for clarification through written questions that she answers in turn. "This is remarkably detailed," he comments at one point, genuine respect in his voice. "You have a sharp eye for observation, Miss Clara. Many trained constables would struggle to maintain this level of attention to detail." The investigation's focus narrows steadily toward Mr. Thornton, the Duke's trusted steward. For 3 days, Thornton maintains his composure, continuing his duties with the same efficient precision that has characterized his service for decades. But Clara notices the strain beginning to show, the way his hand trembles slightly when he pours the Duke's morning tea, the beads of perspiration on his forehead despite the cool spring weather, the frequency with which he retreats to his office to compose himself. The confrontation, when it finally comes, occurs in the Great Hall. Inspector Ashford has assembled all the senior household staff, along with the Duke and Duchess. Elizabeth, though still recovering, has insisted on being present. She sits in a high-backed chair, her posture regal despite her weakened state, her eyes fixed on the proceedings with fierce attention. "Mr. Thornton," Inspector Ashford begins, his voice carrying through the cavernous space, "we have examined the apothecary records from London. The medications delivered to this household do not match those prescribed by the Duchess's physician. They contain substances known to produce symptoms mimicking heart disease and nervous exhaustion. The orders for these altered medications were placed under your signature." Thornton's face drains of colour, but he draws himself up stiffly. "That is impossible. I have served this family faithfully for 35 years. This is clearly some misunderstanding." "We also have correspondence," the inspector continues, pulling documents from his case, "between yourself and various parties, including oblique references to justice long delayed and debts that must be paid. You were not as careful in disposing of your letters as you believed, Mr. Thornton." The steward's eyes dart around the room, perhaps seeking escape or ally, but finding neither. His gaze lands briefly on Clara, standing quietly near the doorway, and something ugly twists in his expression. Rage at being exposed, resentment that his carefully constructed plan has been unraveled by someone he considered insignificant. "She had no right," he says suddenly, his voice rising. "Control finally fracturing. A mute maid, rifling through things that don't concern her, making accusations against her betters." Her betters! The Duchess's voice, though weak, cuts through Thornton's protest like a blade. Everyone turns to look at her. Elizabeth's hands grip the arms of her chair, her knuckles white with emotion. "That young woman saved my life, Mr. Thornton. While you, whom we trusted with our household, our finances, our very safety, were systematically poisoning me. What could I possibly have done to deserve such hatred?" Thornton's facade finally crumbles entirely. Decades of suppressed bitterness pour forth in a torrent of words. He speaks of his father, dismissed from service by Elizabeth's family 40 years ago over accusations of theft that Thornton swears were false. He describes growing up in poverty while the aristocrats lived in luxury, nursing his resentment like a wound that never healed. When opportunity arose to enter service in the Duke's household, he had seized it not as a career, but as a chance for revenge against the family he held responsible for his father's ruin. "I waited," he says, his voice thick with emotion. "I served faithfully, earned your trust, rose to steward. I waited for the perfect moment to make you suffer as my father suffered, to take from you what you took from him, dignity, respect, the ability to provide for his family." He turns his gaze to the Duchess, and in his eyes is a hatred that makes several people step back. "You don't even remember him, do you? John Thornton, dismissed without reference, unable to find work, dead within 2 years from despair and drink. But I remembered. I have remembered every single day." The silence that follows his confession is profound. Even Inspector Ashford, accustomed to human darkness in his profession, appears momentarily affected by the depth of bitterness on display. The Duke's face has gone grey, aged 10 years in the span of this conversation. "And for this grudge," Edward says slowly, "you would have killed an innocent woman. Elizabeth had nothing to do with decisions made by her father decades ago. She was barely born when your father was dismissed." "She bore the name," Thornton replies flatly. "That was enough." Inspector Ashford signals to the constables who have been waiting outside. They enter and take Thornton into custody with swift efficiency. As he is led away, the former steward maintains a rigid dignity, his head held high despite the circumstances. He does not look at Clara again, though she stands witness to his departure, her expression unreadable. In the aftermath, the household staff sit in stunned silence in the servants' hall. Mrs. Henderson weeps openly, mourning the betrayal of a colleague she has worked alongside for decades. Others speak in hushed voices, revisiting past events with new understanding, seeing patterns they had missed while trust remained intact. Clara sits apart from the others, exhausted from the emotional weight of the past days. She feels no triumph, only a profound weariness and relief that the threat to the Duchess has finally been eliminated. Young Thomas approaches and sits beside her, saying nothing, offering only companionable silence, perhaps the greatest gift one can give to someone who lives in a world without words. Upstairs in the family quarters, the Duke and Duchess hold each other in their private sitting room. Through the walls, the rest of the household can hear the muffled sounds of Elizabeth's tears, not of fear or grief, but of overwhelming gratitude for a life she had come perilously close to losing, saved by the courage of a servant whom society would deem voiceless and powerless, yet who proved to possess more strength than any of them had imagined possible. Spring gives way to early summer at Northbridge Castle, and with the changing season comes a transformation more profound than any shift in weather. The investigation's conclusion and Mr. Thornton's arrest have left the household fundamentally altered, as if the very walls of the ancient building have absorbed the shock and rearranged themselves into new configurations. The Duchess recovers her health with remarkable speed once the poisoning ceases. Colour returns to her complexion, vitality to her movements. She begins hosting afternoon tea again, receiving visitors from neighbouring estates, resuming her role in local charitable organisations. But something essential has changed in Elizabeth, a keener awareness of mortality, a deeper appreciation for loyalty, and a determination to acknowledge those whose contributions have previously gone unrecognized by their social betters. It is at one of these afternoon gatherings, with ladies from 3 neighbouring estates assembled in the drawing room, that the Duchess makes her announcement. The conversation has turned to various philanthropic projects, the expected discourse of aristocratic women seeking meaningful occupation within the constraints of their positions. "I have decided," Elizabeth declares, setting down her teacup with decisive precision, "to establish a fund for the education and welfare of household staff. Too often we take for granted those who serve us faithfully, treating them as mere extensions of our households rather than as individuals with their own needs, talents, and potential." The assembled ladies exchange glances, some supportive, others clearly sceptical of this departure from traditional arrangements. Lady Ashworth, the eldest present and most conservative in her views, raises a carefully plucked eyebrow. "A progressive notion, Elizabeth," she says in a tone that makes "progressive" sound like a criticism. "But one must be careful not to give servants ideas above their station. The social order exists for good reason. Does it?" The Duchess's response carries an edge that silences the room. "The social order very nearly killed me, Charlotte. While I relied upon my betters to maintain household management, trusting in class and position, it was a maid, a young woman without voice or status, who possessed the courage and intelligence to save my life. If that doesn't prompt us to reconsider our assumptions about who has value and why, then we have learned nothing from this ordeal. The silence that follows is uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Elizabeth presses her advantage, outlining her vision: scholarships for servants' children, training programs to develop skills beyond basic service, partnerships with institutions in London that can provide education regardless of social origin. And at the center of her first initiative stands Clara. "I am sending Miss Clara to London," the Duchess announces, "to receive treatment from the finest specialists in speech rehabilitation. She will be accommodated at our townhouse, with all expenses covered, for as long as the treatment requires. When she returns, if she chooses to return, it will be to a position of greater responsibility and recognition." The Duke, who has been standing quietly near the window throughout this gathering, nods his agreement. His transformation has been equally profound, if less publicly displayed. Edward has begun personally reviewing all household arrangements, questioning practices his family has maintained for generations, seeking to understand rather than simply command. His relationship with Clara has evolved into something unprecedented, not friendship, for the social gulf remains too vast, but a mutual respect that transcends the rigid hierarchies of their world. One evening, a week before Clara's scheduled departure for London, the Duke requests her presence in his study. She enters nervously, memories of their previous midnight encounter in this very room still vivid. But this time, Edward's demeanor is entirely different. He gestures for her to sit, another breach of protocol that would have been unthinkable months ago, and regards her with an expression that mingles awkwardness with sincerity. "I have been thinking," he begins, then pauses, choosing his words with evident care, "about the nature of service, of duty, of the obligations we owe to one another, regardless of the accident of birth that places us in different positions. You have taught me something fundamental, Miss Clara, though you have never spoken a word. You have demonstrated that worth is not determined by rank or voice, but by character and courage." He opens a drawer in his desk and withdraws a letter, sealed with the ducal crest. "This is a letter of reference," he explains, "but more than that. It is an acknowledgement that you have rendered service to this family beyond measure, and a guarantee that whatever path you choose in future, whether in service, in business, in any endeavor you wish to pursue, you will have the full support of this household. You are not bound to us, Clara. You are free to make your own choices with our gratitude and assistance." Clara's eyes widen as she takes the letter, understanding the profound gift she has been given. Freedom, opportunity, recognition, things rarely granted to those of her station, especially women, especially those marked by disability or difference. Tears well in her eyes, though she blinks them back, maintaining the composure that has defined her throughout these extraordinary weeks. The day of her departure arrives on a bright June morning. The household staff gathers in the courtyard to see her off, an unprecedented display that speaks to how thoroughly Clara's actions have disrupted normal social boundaries. Some faces show genuine warmth. Thomas grins openly. Mrs. Henderson dabs at her eyes with a handkerchief despite her earlier criticism. Others remain more reserved, still uncertain about these changes challenging everything they have known. The Duchess insists on accompanying Clara to the motor car, taking her hand in a gesture of affection that would have been shocking months ago, but now seems natural. "Whatever you discover in London," Elizabeth says softly, "whether you find your voice or not, remember this: you have always had a voice through your actions, your courage, your refusal to be silent in the face of injustice. That is worth more than any words." Clara nods, unable to trust herself to maintain composure if she dwells too long on this farewell. She climbs into the motor car, settling into the leather seat with her small case of belongings. As the driver prepares to depart, she looks back at Northbridge Castle, its ancient stones, its towering chimneys, the windows reflecting morning sunlight. This place has been her home, her prison, her testing ground. Whatever London brings, whatever future awaits, she will carry these experiences with her. The motor car pulls away, gravel crunching beneath the tires. As the castle recedes in the distance, Clara feels something shift within her chest. Not quite hope, not yet certainty, but possibility. The weight that has pressed upon her voice for so many years begins ever so slightly to lift.